why did you ask for a book on climate change for Advent? What were the connections between that and Advent in your mind?
Well, I made a promise to myself a few years ago that in Advent, I would always preach about what the church calls the last things. Because most people think of Advent now as getting ready for Christmas, which of course it is. But the church traditionally has said that Advent's a time when we think about judgment, death, heaven and hell, eternal life, the ultimate things. And so I made that promise some years ago, and I've pretty much kept the promise. Whether it's a school assembly with 7-year-olds or York Minster, I try to talk about these ultimate things. And the biggest crisis and challenge facing the human race at the moment, without question, is the climate catastrophe and emergency that we're part of. It is an existential threat to life on Earth, so huge and so enormous that there's a huge temptation for us to bury our head in the sand. And for people of perhaps our generation, we can probably stumble on until we die and not be too affected by it. But our children and our children's children are going to reap the whirlwind of our failings. So for me, it's a great theme for Advent. If Advent is about facing up to ultimate things, to the reality of God's judgment upon us, and judgment in the Bible is very interesting because we're judged. It's about consequences. If you do this, this is going to happen, is what the prophets say over and over again. It's actually very common sense stuff. And we're being told that if you carry on living like this, inhabiting the world in this way, this is where it's leading. So it struck me as being a great Advent theme.
I've structured the book through using that first verse of Sleepers Wake, the great Bach Advent hymn. And this week, midnight solemn's hour is tolling, and seraph notes are onward rolling. They call on us, our part to take. So thinking about that, what struck you this week in the material in week 2?
Yeah, well, I was particularly struck by the parallel you made between the spiritual disciplines and the life we're supposed to lead, and the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm just trying to find. Yes, I think it's on the one Wednesday, 12 steps, where your opening line is, "I am Nicholas, and I'm addicted to fossil fuels." I thought it was a really arresting opening sentence. And I think a fantastic place to start about with just recognizing that the whole way our economy is run, the whole way we live our lives, one of the ways of waking us up to the reality of that is to think about it as an addiction, that we don't know how to live without these things. And it's not that we're going to have to learn to live without them. Well, we are without fossil fuels, but we're going to have to negotiate a different way of inhabiting the earth where we free ourselves from this addiction and manage in a different way. And I mean, that is daunting and challenging, but I liked the way that I liked the way you'd approached it. I mean, the other thing I'd say, a bit of scripture I keep coming back to is when Jesus says the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get anywhere with this until we confront the truth of our situation and the way we live our lives.
Well, that text was very much in my mind through the writing of this. Actually, that's really interesting you pick up on that. And 12 steps groups have become very common. A lot of people have got first or close second-hand experience of them. But the one I thought you'd pick up on would be the Pope. And that sense of we won't really get our relationship with this creation right until we've learned to contemplate and appreciate that we can't just consume and use it, but there's something beautiful here that we've been given to treasure.
Yeah, well, yes. I think that the Pope's writing on this and his leadership on this has been hugely inspiring. When I read that bit of the book, the other thing that came to my mind was a few years ago I walked the Camino to Santiago de Compostela. And each day, I said my prayers, and when I woke up each morning, I mean, I didn't, I was walking for like 9-10 hours across northern Spain on my own, and I said morning prayer each morning, and but I didn't say it in the hostel where I was staying for the night. Each morning I said, I'm going to wait, Lord, give me somewhere beautiful to say my prayers today. And of course, he always did. It was very beautiful, northern Spain. And so as soon as I'd found somewhere very, very beautiful, I'd sit down, get out my phone to say the office, and which of course includes the Lord's Prayer. And my understanding of the Lord's Prayer was radically changed by the experience of walking, particularly around the verse in the Lord's Prayer, give us today our daily bread. Now, this is a prayer I'm assuming you and people listening to us talking are familiar with. Most of us say this prayer every day, or at least every week. But I think I'd said it all my life every day without really thinking about what some of it meant. I know I'm a bit slow, but it really hit me forcibly that give us today our daily bread means give me today enough for today. Stop me, save me from wanting more than my share. And I think that's one of the themes that runs through the Pope's teaching, that it is through prayer and contemplation of ourselves and our place in the earth that we understand that we need to play our part, live within our means, understand and appreciate our footprint, tread lightly on the earth. And the real big challenge to us as individuals and as societies is to learn what does enough actually look like. I don't pretend I know how we're going to do that, but I find it hard to think of a more important question, because part of the addiction, or another addiction, is that we are addicted to wanting more. So when I walked across northern Spain, I had 9 kilograms of stuff in my rucksack on my back, and it turned out it was too much. So I took, if you'll forgive me, I took 3 pairs of knickers, 3 pairs of socks, 3 shirts, and I discovered I only needed 2. And that was an amazing discovery. Wash one, wear one, wash one, wear one. I didn't need that 3rd pair that for some reason I thought was so important. And then you come back, I live in Bishop Thorpe Palace, there's a bit of a clue in the title, you come back to all this stuff. And so that renegotiating our relationship with belongings, the way we're trained to be faithful consumers, endlessly buying stuff that we don't really want, let alone need. All of that, the Christian faith and the Christian narrative says it is possible to inhabit this world differently.
It's interesting, isn't it, with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and the energy crisis that we're facing that's going to be so pressing on people this winter, that it's immediately thrown up the discussions again about what's the place of fossil fuels and how do we secure them and how are we going to make a transition from them. Now, that seems to me really, really a serious problem that we're facing. And the question is, where is the climate crisis in relation to the other issues that we're facing? And how are we going to make these decisions collectively together? Because it's not just me, but it's about how we do this together.
I share the anxiety and the dilemma here, and it's not lost on me, as I'm sure it isn't on you, that we're having this discussion at a time of political turmoil in our own country, where the things that I think most of us do know we really do need to be talking about are simply not really on the agenda. We urgently need to accelerate the greening of our economy. I think we need that philosophic and spiritual debate about what is enough, and how do we free ourselves from the addiction of not just of fossil fuels, but of thinking we must always have more. That is where I think the Christian narrative can particularly help us. But those things are not on the national agenda at the moment, or the international agenda in the way they should be. But again, I think that is where Christian people and the church have a really important part to play.
So come on, you're Archbishop of York, and you're saying we've all got to find our place, and we've all got a part to play. What are you going to do different?
One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on keeping my promise about my preaching and teaching, but I'm going to be drawing on the resource of this book and these themes to help people make the connection between the traditional Advent teaching of the church and the climate emergency that we're part of. I'm going to continue to make some of the changes that I've been trying to make in my life, but press on with them. So one small but significant change I've been making in the last year or so is about meat. I'm not a vegetarian, but I did make a decision to, really seriously change the way I eat. As you know, and other people may know, our reliance upon often cheap imported meat and eating it so often in our diet, not only it's not very good for us in terms of our health, it's very bad for the health of the planet. I've been interested this year as well on a visit to Hillfield Friary, somewhere that you know well, about the loaf principle, about trying only to buy stuff that's local, organic, animal friendly, fair traded. So yes, looking at my consumer choices is something I can do. And some people respond saying, oh, but what difference can that make? That one small thing. Well, if all of us collectively make these decisions, it does make a difference. But also, the small changes we make to our own lifestyles has, I think, a knock-on effect in other people's lives, and also changes the way that our own relationship with the earth starts to change as well. I was interested in what you wrote in the book about, I think you said you had, was it a plastic-free Lent you tried to have once, and how in the end it was impossible. But I think it's really worth trying these things in order to discover just how reliant we've become. So they're the things I'll be doing in Advent.